one thing. Yes. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to GSDE 2021 afternoon session. Thanks for being here. Before we begin, let me remind you of one thing. This session will be recorded and each presenter has 15 minutes to present their paper and 5 minutes for questions. So, okay, let's begin. Our first presenter is Marisa Gelfusa. Is it okay?
Beautiful, beautiful.
Okay, great. And her topic is building capacity and inclusion, applications for universal design for learning in community settings. So she will begin in 1:10. Thanks. And it's Marisa.
And thank you. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. If that is that all right? Are you?
Sure.
Did you have anything to add?
No, thank you so much.
Perfect.
Let's begin here.
All right. Okay. Can everybody see that? Okay, excellent. Ooh, and I can still see you guys. Bonus, amazing. I did a presentation the other day where the screen for whatever, anyway, their software was working that way. Okay, so it's 1:08, but while we're waiting, could I see with, a show of hands, has anybody who's familiar with universal design for learning? You could raise your hands. So that'll tell me a little bit. Ariadne, excellent, very good. Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Very cool. Okay, that's going to be, well, now I have tons of questions for you, but the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and start presenting in about a minute. Is that right, Risella? Okay. Excuse me. Cool. Okay. So welcome. My name is Marisa Gelfusa. I'm a community facilitator. And I've worked in the community sector in Quebec and Ontario for roughly about 20 years. And I'm currently doing my master's in educational studies at Concordia University. And today we're going to talk about two of my favorite topics. One is universal design for learning, and the other one is community education. And the two questions I'd like to look at today are, what is the role of community education in promoting inclusion and learning? And how can universal design for learning, excuse me, support this mission? Oops, hang on just a moment, please. I'm just going to, there we go. Perfect. So just a few definitions before we start. We're going to be talking about community learning, and in this context, we're talking about it as the kind of learning that's strengthened communities by improving people's knowledge, skill, confidence to work towards capacity building, lifelong learning, and active citizenship. We're going to talk about non-formal learning. So here we're talking about structured learning activities with learning objectives, but happening outside of formal learning institutions. Also informal learning, which is just the kind of learning that happens every day from a magazine, from media, something you might learn about from being in a committee. And we're going to talk about universal design for learning. We'll go into more detail later, but in essence, it's an educational model framework that was developed at the Harvard School of Education by David Rose and Ann Meyer. And it's based on what we understand about what the brain learning networks do. But the most important thing I want to tell you about UDL Universal Design for Learning, is that the framework maximizes access and minimizes barriers to learning. Here we go. Next. So I thought I would just give you a sense of community education, what that looks like in a community setting. When I'm talking about a community setting, I'm talking about, you know, brick and mortar, nonprofit organizations, but I'm also talking about those bunch of community organizations that sprung up in neighborhoods when COVID started, that, you know, did food collection, checked up on some of the more vulnerable communities. So it could be formal or informal. So community education is actually one of the most underrated and under-researched and underrepresented ways that learning happens in the community. And that happens in a bunch of different ways with a bunch of different people. So first of all, there's a lot of non-formal learning. So if you're thinking about computer workshops, literacy workshops, if you're employment workshops for newcomers to Canada. So there's a bunch of non-formal learning. Informal learning happens a lot through activities in community learning. One of the things that we see a lot are community gardens, community kitchens being used to share ideas about climate change, share ideas about human rights, having sensitive conversations around activities. There's a lot of learning that happens that way in community settings. The participants have very diverse characteristics, and those could be socioeconomic, they could be learning backgrounds, language abilities, just physical abilities. And very often you'll be in a room where you're facilitating in a community sector, and you'll have somebody who has several degrees in the same room as somebody who has had very negative experiences in a schooling environment, somebody who's still learning English. And you have to be, as a facilitator, as maybe the person who's the formal or peer facilitator or whatever it is, you still have to bring the information home. You have to be effective in helping people acquire the information, which takes me to my next point, because very often that information is high stakes, right? It's about, oh, thank you. It's about your life. You know, if you think about a workshop on that might be on how to develop your escape plan if you're living in an abusive home, it's very important that the person is able to engage with that learning, that they are able to acquire the information, and that they're able to apply it. So there's high stakes and often very low resources. Nonprofits and community groups are very often not very well funded. And people have very diverse motivations for engaging with the learning. Sometimes they have to be there. Sometimes they're there out of survival. They're members of an agency because by being members, they receive some material support. And so all these things, they're factors that become very important when it comes to learning and the effectiveness with which you can deliver learning. And nonprofits or community groups, their mission is often to build capacity with individuals and communities to create collective change. But they're also this whole ecosystem of learning where a bunch of different parties contribute to the learning in the nonprofit and also receive information and learning from nonprofits. And nonprofits do a ton of teaching or knowledge sharing with funders and governments and policymakers around specific populations. I mean, think of also a lot of training of volunteers, like learning to be on a distress line, families and family members. Most organizations that work with children will also work with families. So it's not an easy place. It's a place that has a lot of challenges for learning, and where it's very important that the learning take place. And some of the barriers that we're looking at is it's very resource dependent, a lot of project-based funding, where you know, you might want to keep a project going, but if the funds are finished, sometimes you have to close the whole thing down if it was a great training program for people in the community. There's systemic barriers. A lot of your funding is tied to the numbers of clients that you can help, funder perceptions of what solutions might be for this type of, for this group. And there's also little funding to support the people who do the facilitation, to develop their own skills and what have you. And it's often, the facilitation is often added to already a long list of existing tasks that the person is accomplishing in the course of their day. So if we come to universal design for learning, it's based on universal design. So universal design is that design that means, okay, if I have to design a door, one of the things that it has to do is that it has to let people in and out. But the other thing that it has to do is it must be able to do that for the greatest number of people. So it cannot have any barriers. And it's kind of that, but UDL, Universal Design for Learning, is that, but in an educational framework. And it's based on brain learning networks. It's asset-based. So it recognizes that everybody comes to the table with strengths as a learner, and also areas where they need support. And what the objective is to play to the strengths, to strengthen the whole individual. And it recognizes that diversity is the norm and that inclusion and equity is the focus. The other thing that it does is much like the, I don't know if you're familiar with the social model of disability, which means that if a person with a disability is unable to, you know, to get around or what have you, it's not because of them, it's because of the environment. And what this says is that as facilitators, it is our responsibility to develop the tools and the environment that will create access for the greatest number of learners. And I want to make a nuance here, not just access, not just so that people can learn, but also that they can feel good as learners, that they can feel successful and strong as learners. I know that education is important to all of us. That's why we're here, and we understand how important it is that a person has a sense of self-efficacy of themselves as a learner. And a tagline of UDL is tight goals, flexible means. So because what happens is that what UDL does is it offers, oh, sorry, 5 minutes? Okay, thank you. So it offers tight goals. So it means like the goal, the quality of the goal, it stays the same. It's not watered down. It's not nothing like that. But what you're doing is you're offering more roads to get to this specific objective. And by helping people understand themselves as learners and by giving them choices as learners, okay, I can write a paper, or I can do a podcast, or I can show you that I am competent in another way, just by virtue of having those choices and knowing yourself as a learner, the experience of learning is completely different, and there's a lot more control and decision making on the part of the learner, which is excellent. And what that means is that, can you see my cursor moving? Yes? Okay, great. So that means that there's a bunch of things. There's always going to be a need for some accommodation, right? There's no way that, but there's so many things here that we can do in the universal design for learning sphere, that so much potential that we are missing out on simply by not thinking about inclusion when we design, that it's a real waste, really. So how UDL can support inclusive learning in community settings is it supports a community approach by identifying the barriers and the supports that are necessary. So there's a convening that happens. There's a connection with the community.
Hi, Marisa, so you have 2 more minutes.
Oh, thank you. Yes, it's my final slide. It enables increased awareness around inclusive learning. So if you're going to sit down and you say, yes, the objective of what I'm trying to do here, trying to get across to the learners is X, and my other objective is making sure that I can enable that this learning gets to as many people as possible in a way that works for them. It fosters greater agency and participation. And it's also, there's an abundance of tools and a flexibility of tools. So people can start anywhere. They can start small in redesigning their tools and their activities. And in conclusion, because nonprofits and community settings have a focus on capacity building and equity and developing agency, and because they have a high learner diversity and that the stakes are high in terms of the need for the effectiveness of the learning. So UDL is a real match for that. And this concludes. Thank you so much for your attention. And I hope that that was clear, but please connect with me. If you love UDL, we can talk each other's ears off.
Yes, thank you, Marisa. Thank you very much for your excellent presentation, because you touched upon a very social issue. It's a very demanding issue, especially when there is outcry to make a very inclusive society. So this is a time for question periods. If there is any question, you can ask Marisa. And Marisa, you can stop sharing your screen. Then you can see
yes,
all of our
perfect.
faces.
Yeah, hang on. Let me stop sharing. Here we go.
Great. Yes. So is there any question? If you have any question, you can ask Marisa.
If not, I have questions for you.
No problem, but I have a question for you as well, because it's not a question. It's just my thinking. I can tell you, because
yes,
I know about universality, which is which comes from a very like the conception of modernity, that it's a proposal of everybody being the same, but when we ignore the differences. But an universal design, what I found that it is something very inclusive, that where you place everyone according to their ability. So I like the the framework you use for community setting, because this is a place where people come from different places, different region, different culture. So if we know how to respect and include everyone in a same platform, it is awesome. And I like it, the approach you chose to touch upon a very demanding issue in our society. And I really like that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. So, I mean, the thing about it is about universal design is that it acknowledges that diversity is a given. It doesn't pretend I'm going to do this one thing and this one thing is going to work for everybody. Yes. So, so what it is it's written in, it's baked in. Diversity is a given. I'm going to be confronted with people who have different preferences, different abilities, different thoughts about learning. how am I going to make it work for as many people as possible? And that's what it is. And I mean, that's universal design in architecture, and it's
Yes,
universal
exactly. Because
design for learning.
we can't go back to somewhere it is all homogeneous. It is so mixed
No.
up and it's everywhere. It's so diverse, and we need this type of approach, because otherwise maybe we can survive peacefully. So yes, so it's very, very important, and I really like it. Like, anybody has any question, please ask. Like, Marisa has 3 more minutes.
Yes, I have a question for you guys. For the folks who are familiar with universal design for learning, can you tell me what context you've encountered it in, if you feel like it?
Fariha, do you want to talk?
Yes, hello. First of all, Marisa, thank you so much for such a wonderful presentation.
Oh, thank
Actually,
you.
yes, this project is really very close to my heart, and in future, I really want to work on this. After some minutes, I'm going to present my.
Yes, no problem.
I'd be happy to connect.
Yeah.
Would you like me to connect with you?
Yeah, yes.
Yes.
So, I'll really appreciate if you just give me your email or your contact. So I'll get back to you. And I really
would love it.
That, especially the way you had explained all levels. That was amazing. I really loved that.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Like I said, I'll talk anybody's ear off about community or UDL.
Yeah, because it will take more time, and I want to discuss with you how we can implement in different contexts. And you have asked right person. And so, but
okay, perfect. I'm going to put my email in the chat.
Okay,
and that's good for anybody. All right.
So this is a good community, you see.
Yes.
Even in online platform.
Yeah.
Yes. Fantastic. Yeah. Thank you so much, everybody. It's great to see you, and thank you for caring about education and how it changes the world, really.
So thank you, Marisa, for your very lively presentation. And now there is the time to start the next presentation. And the next presenter is Fariha Asif, and her presentation is Mapping Out Low Achievers' Plights in Turbulent Times and its Remedial Measures in Virtual Classroom. So welcome, Fariha, and Fariha will start exactly at 1:35.
Thank you. And thank you so much. Thank you so much. Can I share my screen in the meanwhile?
Sure, please do so.
Just give me a minute. Let me just share. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, that's great. That's great. Okay. When can I start?
You can start at 1:35. So it's 1:31. So just it will be just in 4 minutes.
Okay, no worries. Thank you. Actually, I'm in a different time zone.
Oh,
so that's
okay.
Yeah. At the moment, I'm not in Canada. I'm in Saudi Arabia.
Oh,
so
okay.
Yeah, so it's 10 p.m.
Oh my goodness.
It's
So you've had a whole day, Fariha.
Yeah, yes, no worries. I am actually enjoying. Mm. Yeah, can I start now?
Yes, you can. You can.
Okay,
Great.
thank you so much. First of all, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Fariha Asif, and welcome everyone. Good morning. I'm Fariha Asif, and I'm working as a teacher trainer. I'm a certified mentor at King Abdul Aziz University, Saudi Arabia. But at the same time, I'm a student at University of Alberta. After 2 months, I'll be in Alberta soon. Yes, hopefully. So what do you think of my topic, like mapping out low achievers polite in turbulent times? So what do you think of this topic?
Fariha, sorry to interrupt. Can you please turn your video on? If
Okay, can't you see me?
no, your video is off.
Okay, let
I
me
can't
see.
see you. No.
Oh, I see. From here I need to actually can't see. Yes, can you see me now? Okay.
Yes, I can see you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. So what do you think of this topic? Are we really struggling in virtual classrooms or not? Or am the only one?
Well, if you want to know my answer, it depends. For me, I'm not struggling. It's perfectly okay for me. I can stay home. I can maintain my family life. I can help my kids from home. I mean, it really depends on the context. So my simple answer, though.
Okay, fine. So here, my question is regarding teaching techniques, dealing with students, conveying content. Yes, we are in a comfort zone. we are teaching from home, but struggling in a sense like technology. We are struggling with technology, we are struggling with time zones, we are struggling with different learning styles. So it's a hard time, I believe, for all of us, and especially the transition from one face-to-face to online, and that was drastic, that was immediate, that was abrupt. So it was definitely a big challenge for many teachers. I don't say for all of them, some of them were already familiar with. Teachers like me who really like to see facial expressions, body language, so maybe they had a tough time. So that's why I chose this topic, and I really wanted to know how can we help other teachers in this time. So today I will talk about this, how we can, like, first of all, why do some students struggle with learning in, and how can teachers effectively teach study skill strategies, and we need to know about critical characteristics of high achievers and low achievers. We need to understand pedagogical philosophy and purpose of differentiated instruction, plan to engage students in productive and active learning experience during the online classrooms. We need to identify and experience the various tools through which classroom teachers can implement differentiated instruction. As Marisa has very rightly explained, that was amazing universal design. That is one framework. Differentiated instruction is another framework. So according to context, according to students' need, we can implement any framework, any you can say any paradigm or any strategy. So before I proceed, I want to show you a video, and then I want your feedback on this. Hopefully it will work.
I know this one video of. Oh. So, and when they get up there, they really run.
Oh, hush up. Oh. See? All I was doing was helping.
Yes. What message has you taken from this video? Any idea?
Well, I think help and support.
Yes, definitely.
The first thing, yeah, it just comes to my mind. Maybe it's help and support is very important.
Yes, so we have noticed that some ducklings were able to cross that curb on their own. Some really wanted some help. Our teachers, we can relate it in our context, in our teaching context. So a little help, sometime a little push-up can, make someone make progress like anything. So as a teacher, our role is to facilitate, to show right path, to guide students. Some teachers, many of them are facing challenges. That is time commitment, communication, assessment. Fear of cheating is involved in online teaching. Course content, course completion is this, and learning management systems, and students' engagement. Some students are really hesitant. They don't want to open their camera. They don't want to take part in lessons. So as teachers, many of us are struggling with all this. At the same time, low achievers are also victim of this time. They are already low achievers, but now they have no motivation at all. So we can say lack of motivation, again, time management, virtual engagement, There are so many distractions, and one thing more, some students, they have no computer knowledge, and when they face difficulties, technical difficulties, they don't know how they can fix on their own, and they don't know how they can collaborate and how they can adapt this change. We need to see who low achievers are. Mostly people or some teachers are, they believe low achievers are those who don't show their good results. Sometimes we need to we need to really, we need to think through, we need to investigate, we need to see who low achievers are. Robert Reid 2013 has rightly explained that executive functions are very much related to low achievement. So that is mental process that control and coordinate related to the learning. Executive function is not the same as intelligence. Even students who are quite intelligent might experience difficulties with executive functions process related to learning. Maybe that is processing information, retaining and recalling information, organizing material and managing time, selecting, monitoring, and using effective learning and learning strategies. So we can see high achievers and low achievers. What is the difference? I will not go in detail. I can share my slide if you want later. Process information, higher achievers, they are very smart. They know how they can connect information to their prior knowledge. But on the other hand, low achievers, they don't know how they can activate their prior knowledge, though they have prior knowledge. They don't know how the importance of the concept of the study. They don't know information, that they always take notes on important information. They monitor their understanding of content. But on the other hand, low achievers, they don't care of such things. Retaining information, and we can say they use strategies. They help themselves. On the other hand, the students, they low achievers, they have difficulty in remembering information. We have noticed that high achievers are always very focused on task. They always keep record. They show their seriousness. They always have complete turn in assignments on time. They always ask questions. They are always eager. They are always keen. But on the other hand, low achievers, sometimes they forget to bring items to classroom. They always come up with excuses. Selecting, monitoring, and using strategies are, they use a variety of strategies, and they are very flexible and generalized to other situation. But on the other hand, low achievers, they don't know how to study. They forget to use strategies. They lack knowledge of an appropriate strategy. They sometimes use the same ineffective strategies of all academic tasks. They don't change their study style. So at this time,
you have 5 minutes.
Okay, we need to differentiate. We need to use this framework. Differentiated instruction is a framework. It's a tailored instruction, and we can, as teachers, we can differentiate content, process, and product and classroom environment. We don't need to change content. Only we need to change material. We don't need to change process. We only need to know student learning styles. So we need to show them, we need to differentiate product. We need to praise their efforts instead of their intelligence. So we can you can say, like, we can give different tasks to different students. We can ask them, some of them can just deliver a speech, some can work on projects, some can write. So in that way, we can differentiate the project and learning environment. We can provide them optimal learning conditions in which learning will take place. Bloom's taxonomy will definitely help us to differentiate in task distribution, task designing, and when we give content to some students, we can only, students who are unfamiliar, we can only focus on language, knowledge, comprehension, and application. Students who have partial mastery, we can give them any task in which they need to apply, they need to analyze or evaluation. But students with high level of intelligence or mastery, we can make them not only evaluate, but synthesis. So in that way, we can differentiate in our classrooms. In remote instruction, video conferencing, or live stream apps like Zoom, Google Meet, FaceTime, according to students' need, and Google Classroom, Flipgrid, all these things we can use in our classroom. But we need to remember, too many choices result in, like, I mean, we should have path. We should have a framework. We should have a clear-cut, instruction to ourselves. So 3 or 4 digital resources, more than enough for this. And that's the end of my presentation. I just want to show a video so you can see how can we differentiate. Yes. So here I would like to conclude this. I would like to say every learner need not fit the same mold, nor should we force them to do so. If a learner can't learn the way we teach, maybe we should teach the way they learn. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Fariha, for your excellent presentation. And when you touched upon a very, very ongoing topic, because we are going through this reality, literally all the time, especially this symposium, like online, on Zoom, everything. So yeah, it's a very good topic though. Thank you very much. And while even at different time zone, I can see your son maybe coming background. So it's alive. Thank you so much. So you can stop sharing your screen and.
Okay, 1 minute.
Yes, exactly. And so You have 5 minutes for questions. So please, anyone have any question for Fariha, please ask.
Yes, so yes, I would like to take your questions, please.
Hi, Fariha. So I had a question in
Yes.
terms of, differentiate, I was very interested to know, what your thoughts are on differentiated learning online. So what are some things that could work, right? Because when you're online, you're often speaking to a lot of people, right? And how can you take the time to, how do you pay particular attention to those students that are needing that extra support?
Yeah, thank you so much for asking this question. What I most of the time do, I create breakout rooms. It takes a lot of preparation. I need to prepare myself.
Yes.
First of all, when I start my class, I just interview them. I keep writing their interest, their background knowledge, and everything. I keep my own notes. Then what I do, I make groups. And according to their ability, I just give them tasks, and I just send them in the breakout room. Maybe in one breakout room, there are 4 people. One's role is a leader, one's role is taking notes, one's role is a facilitator, one's role is to collect information from Google or something like that, any task. So in that way, according to their interest, according to their capabilities, I design my task. I differentiate, and I just give when they come back from breakout room, I make them talk or present, so I praise, as I said in my presentation, I praise their efforts.
Yes.
So for me, if my student has shown a little contribution, even interest in learning, that's my achievement. And a sense of, if I have I'm successful in instilling sense of achievement or love of learning in my student, my task is done. My student will learn rest of the life. So I have power as a teacher. I can break or I can make. So I need to take care of emotional health, and I need to take, I'm responsible of my students' emotional health, and I'm responsible of my students' learning. So that's big responsibility. As a teaching is not easy. It does not matter if you have experience of decades or you are a novice teacher. No, teaching is responsibility. Teaching is hard. It's a challenge. That's in that way I differentiate in online learning.
Yes,
Great.
thank you so
very
much. Yeah, thank you for your very good response, Fariha. And so with Fariha, so we're going to start the next presenter.
Hello. Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for joining my presentation today. My name is Antonia Macris, and I'm a Master's of Arts student in Educational Technology at Concordia University. And my paper presentation will be on the topic of applications of emerging wearable technology from K-12 to higher education. So I'll jump right in and provide some context on the topic and its importance. So with current trends in emerging digital technologies, people can sometimes feel consumed with the number of devices we use that have become essentially an extension of ourselves. From our smartphones to our laptops and tablets, we constantly juggle the use of multiple platforms and technological tools that are accessible right at our fingertips. However, a recent emerging form of our utility and technological dependency is that of wearable technologies, where Moreno and Woodruff describe them as constituting a shift from computers as detached tools to technologies as embodied companions that become an extension of the self. So to expand beyond the power that smartphones have on the manner in which people across the globe develop behaviors in information seeking and consumption, companies have been seen investing more and more in wearable technology. And this recent international focus highlights the increased integration of wearable technology in everyday life. Now, the discussion that we have that we will be having today is based off a literature review in where I examined scholarly trends of the emergence of wearable technology to help situate its function, its applications in pedagogy and the classroom, along with its limitations and support in referencing factors of cybersecurity, technological distractions, and institutional systemic strategies. And these findings ultimately can provide further context in the presence and relevance of wearable technology within education today. So with that, let's dive right in. So what is wearable technology? According to Fernandez, wearable technologies, also known as wearables, are forms of computational or sensory electronic devices that can be worn with clothing or on the body. So considering its basic definition, a wearable can also be seen as any form of computer device carried on a person as well. An ancient example of a wearable stems from ancient China, where it was customary for people to wear an abacus around their neck that helped them perform daily computing tasks more easily. In today's day and age, wearable technology and computing devices function with the same purpose, but are minimal in size, require a Wi-Fi connection, and a charged battery. Now, with the first tiny computer, it was developed at MIT in early 1960s, and some features from this early device that was, in fact, initially created to access computer-generated algorithms in the playing of roulette exist in wearable technologies today, where the small size and portable nature allows users to interact with the physical world with support and ease of accessibility to computing technology. And since the 1980s, advances in wearable technology were seen in the presence of wristwatches that had calendars and calculators and games. So we'll jump in to wearable technology today. Now today, with the expansion of the modern digital ecosystem and the advancement of technology, wearables have become much easier to produce in helping to ease the performance and accessibility of everyday tasks. Such tools also function to track personalized user information and communicate with surrounding technological applications. According to Balkin, smartwatches, smart glasses, activity trackers, and health monitors are just some of the most popular commercial off-the-shelf, or COTS abbreviated, wearable technologies, stated as a result of market research conducted by International Data Corp. The wearables industry is estimated to reach $1.29 trillion in spending. And companies have been seen investing in wearable devices that allow users to track data that presents information both about themselves and about others. So common areas of wearable investments lie in bracelets that track personal movements, vital statistics, body temperature to meet fitness goals, while examples of using wearables to monitor the actions and behaviors of others is seen in, for example, in dog tracking of their movement and their health. And as well, large investments are also made in the realm of wearable development for parents that use these devices to track behaviors and GPS locations of their infants and preschoolers. So we'll jump right in, we'll move into applications of wearable technology in education. And we'll start with K-12 education, and then we'll move over to higher education. So in considering wearable applications in the realm of education, digitization of content and learning processes have transformed the way students interact while learning to promote collaboration, visual learning, and student engagement in the classroom. Now, in a report discussed by Pascapella, a forecast on the subject predicted that between 2016 and 2020, the classroom wearable technology market would grow 46% annually. In K-12 education, wearable devices are believed to hold potential application in the classroom with a positive influence on visual learning through virtual reality and augmented reality learning devices, and information sharing through the use of smartwatches and headbands. Now, these methods enable a simplified learning process with an advantage of flexible access to content, educational content. And since schools have automated the use of computers, tablets, and interactive whiteboards already, wearable technologies really seem to take these technologies one step further. In a report on the potential of wearable applications in the classroom by Marino and Woodruff, 3 areas were identified to positively influence learning in an educational setting. First, students were able to access material remotely. Second, the classroom experience can be augmented to include new digital and interactive forms to engage learners. And third, wearables provide learning resource accessibility. Additionally, for pedagogical development, wearables have the ability to continuously collect user data and centrally aggregate this information for analysis, which ultimately helps to determine and measure performance and feedback indicators for the learner's response. So this technology can also help build learner profiles that can represent their optimal performance. So moving into higher education. In higher ed, wearables can provide students with an alternative information sharing experience that plays on sensory elements through technologies. And this has been seen in the classroom application of Google Glass, Muse, GoPro cameras, and VR. The hands-free technology appeals to learners because it provides them with the freedom to move within an educational space, to allow the digital applications to interact with the real and physical environment. Wearables are also seen as an innovative extension to mobile learning devices that transform the learning and teaching process to allow faster information access in a more active and primarily self-directed approach. So in a study by Atala and Illiger on wearable applications in higher ed specifically, they recognize that the use of wearable technologies can be used to support learning in and across different subjects and disciplines, such as VR head-mounted displays used in engineering, such as wearables allowing medical students to watch a surgery in real time, and GoPro cameras that are used to record students performing tasks for learning and evaluation of their performance. So such devices allow learners to document and observe the learning environment, to better evaluate their performance. And a result of this is having the learner feel a deeper connection with the material and an analysis and understanding of visual events through this scenario-based practice. Now, lastly, a major benefit of wearables within education is seen in their ability to help increase safety in the classroom. They can function as a monitor for students with disabilities, with learning difficulties and illnesses by sending alerts should any emergency situations arise. So now we'll dive into addressing limitations of wearable technology in education. Of course, upon examining scholarly literature that supports the benefits of wearable technology integration within the classroom, it's important to also consider possible limitations, concerns, and ways in which we can address them. So, although wearables are known for their innovative ability to collect, track, and aggregate data in their integration with interconnected computing programs, the data collected, although useful and easy to use, must meet the individual's need for privacy. This is why cybersecurity is one of the main issues. It is important that this sensitive information be handled ethically in its management and storage. Now, research also shows some indication that unfortunately, the current generation of wearable users don't prioritize cybersecurity. When used within a classroom setting, the lines around data ownership start becoming a little blurred. So it is recommended that technologies selected for the classroom undergo a vetting process by experts to validate the presence of enhanced security protocols and user consent from the students. And educational institutions must also ensure the users' identifiers that they use for their students are protected. Now, the second limitation is technological distraction. And it considers the distraction that mobile devices can have on the work of learners through texting, web surfing, and gaming. As well, the isolation that wearables can potentially enable as a result of this instant connection to data. In looking at the development of wearable technologies, their design also does not always consider their application for the classroom setting, but are adapted into the classroom afterwards. So this is a fundamental issue. With their multi-purpose nature in and outside of the classroom, their potential to distract its users from the learning process is high. In a survey for educators, growing concerns to using wearables in the classroom included technological misuse, distraction, which we touched upon, and potential for cheating. However, on the part of the educator, they also have responsibility and accountability for their actions, so they must also learn how to effectively facilitate the use of these technologies within an educational context. As well, strict supervision and oversight while using these technologies in the classroom should be implemented, if not mandatory. So, in moving past limitations and considering ways to address them, we've found our way toward institutional systemic strategies for support. So a number of institutional systemic strategies can be considered to support their effective use in the academic setting. And a qualitative study by Bauer considers 4 strategic areas that can be implemented at the institutional level to better integrate wearables for all stakeholders involved. So the first strategy considers increased funding support and conducting a cost-benefit analysis. The second strategy considers providing educators with technical support and tools to offer quality experiences with their students. As a third strategy, they suggest professional development for educators to help them identify and address these limitations. And lastly, they suggest prioritizing the reflection of privacy and confidentiality implications. So to conclude, as a quick overview of what we discussed, the scholarly research on the topic of wearable technology helped take us through its evolution and situate it within today's modern context, from its emergence to its applications within education, both K-12 and higher ed. And the incorporation of wearables in the classroom in both these levels can positively influence student engagement and their learning experience, but only if used responsibly and administered by informed educators to address these limitations that we touched on of technological distraction, cyber ethics, and privacy issues. And there's also potential to address these issues at the institutional level to help educators effectively facilitate the use of wearable technologies in the classroom. So that brings us to the end of our presentation. I wanted to thank you all for staying through it with me. I hope you learned something new about wearables today. And I invite you all to reach out with any questions or connect with me directly through LinkedIn at Antonia Macris. And thank you for joining. Enjoy the rest of the symposium. Thanks. Take care.
Hi, Xinyan. So yeah, we have a break. So now we're going to start again the session, and the next presenter is Xinyan Fang. Okay, and her topic is Faculty Instructors Academic Writing Support for International Students. So Xian, you can start at 2:25. Welcome.
Sure, thank you.
You're welcome. Do you want to share your screen, Xinyan? You have to unmute yourself, yes. Okay, great.
Let me try. Pause. Oh, no. Right, can you see my screen?
Yes, great, yeah.
Thank you.
Just 2 more minutes for you.
Okay. Shall I start? Or just wait for another 2 minutes?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. So I'm going to start right now.
Sure.
Right. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Xinyan. Actually, I'm a master's student at McGill University, and I specialize second language education. So my topic today is faculty instructors academic writing support for international students. I think in this world, there are only 2 kinds of people who are really concerned with the research of academic writing. The first type of people might be the English native speakers who have work experience with second language learners. And in order to improve their qualification, and they would like to dive into the research about academic writing to help with their second language learners. However, the second kind of people I think might be the second language learners themselves, because they want to help themselves and solve the problem. And I am the second type of people because I'm second language learner. And in order to help myself and help other people who have the same problem with me, I would like to dive into the research about academic writing. And that's the originality or positionality of my research. So let's go through with the agenda first. Firstly, I would like to talk about the context and problem. You know, that the number of the international students in Canadian university is increasing. Actually, they have a lot of academic learning problems. And one of the big issues is the writing challenge. So based on the research, we found 4 different kinds of challenges in writing. And the first and second one, you can see the PowerPoint is sentence level and text level. So in order to understand this part, we need to know the difference of 2 words. The first I can tap here is cohesion and coherence. So if you look into the dictionary, cohesion and coherence might have the similar meaning, but actually in writing there are different. So cohesion here is really refers to the sentence level. For example, is the grammar correct in one of the sentence? And is the vocabulary appropriate in this sentence? So this is, we can call them sentence level cohesion. But coherence refers to the text level. For example, you have many paragraphs in your writing, but whether these paragraphs are connected and they are related to convey an argument. So this is text level coherence, and that's the difference between them. So international students have a lot of problems in sentence level cohesion and text level coherence. That's because they have language proficiency problem. And the third problem is the genre awareness. Like you are in different disciplinary classes and your teacher will ask you to complete many different assignments in writing. maybe today your teacher asks you to write a book review, but the other day another teacher asks you to write a scientific report. So they are really different genres, but if you don't understand the differences between genres, you may have a big problem, and that's a big issue. So the next one is the writing conventions. Like students are not familiar with the citations and quotations, so it's also a concern for international students. These are the problems, and also when we look into the research about academic writing, you will find a lot of studies emphasize the student's perspective. I mean, they will say, oh, you are an international student. Okay, in order to improve your writing, you can do this, you can do that. A lot of requirements and restrictions for the international students. But actually, few studies really emphasize the instructor's perspectives. I think the instructor's perspective is really significant. I mean, the teacher's help and support can be very important to improve the students' learning in writing. So that's why my research focused on the instructor's perspective instead of the students. Also, you may ask a question, who are the faculty instructors? So in my research, faculty instructors are the teachers in the university who are teaching different disciplines. So while they are teaching the discipline, they can also scaffold their students in writing. They can support their students' writing, actually. So other people will say, actually, in the university, we have a lot of writing courses. And so this kind of writing courses, like a lot of students come from different backgrounds, different disciplinary backgrounds, and they come to a classroom, one classroom, listen to a writing teacher to deliver a lecture. But the writing teacher has really different disciplinary backgrounds from the students' backgrounds. So it's really hard for the writing teachers to teach them. I mean, the students may understand the writing skills, but when they try to transfer these writing skills into their disciplinary writing, they will find a lot of challenges because each discipline has its own conventions, and it's not always the same thing in different kinds of disciplines. So after the context and problem, you may understand why my idea is about faculty instructor support, and their academic writing support is so important for international students. Then I have two research questions. The first one is, what kinds of academic writing support are faculty instructor offering to international students? We need to understand what they are currently doing to help their students. And the second one is the instructors may have a lot of difficulties to offer this support. Maybe they are occupied by a lot of research work, or they don't have enough time to help their students. So if we understand the difficulties, we can, the university or faculty can provide more help for the instructors too, then they can better support their students in this way. So let's go through the theoretical framework. I think that's the most boring part of the presentation, but I will try to make it easier for you to understand. So first one is academic discourse. You may ask, what is academic writing derived from? So the answer is academic discourse. And because academic writing is rooted in and limited by academic discourse, academic discourse is a process of socialization based on the conventions and practices in certain disciplines. So here we really emphasize a process. That is to say, academic writing is a process-based, not a product-based we couldn't regard writing as a lot of skills and say, okay, if you master these skills, you will be successful in writing. That's not the case. So while the faculty instructors are teaching the content, they can also scaffold students entering into this academic discourse. And so during this process, it is a really individual self-development in academic writing. Yeah. And the second one is the systemic functional linguistic. You may feel that's a really big concept, but if you are not in the second language education area, but I can make an example for you. Like, suppose that you are a second language learner at the very beginning level, and you are asking your teacher how to how to ask for help on direction. You are trying to ask for direction on the street. You don't know how to say the sentence in English. So your teacher showed you a sentence structure. It's, can you show me the way to someplace? And then, so in this case, your meaning is asking for help on direction. You don't know how to go to, where to go to some place. And your, can you show me the way is the language form. So if you connect your meaning with your language forms, then you realize a different social context. So that's how the systemic functional linguistic works. It's the same thing in writing, like you are trying to write a summary of different articles, right? So you have language forms to help you summarize different things. However, if you want to do some critical writing, like you want to criticize somebody's articles, then your language forms will be different.
Hi, Xinyan, you have 5 more minutes.
Thank you. Yeah, that's the systemic functional linguistic, and then the next one is genre pedagogy. Genre refers to really specific moves in the writing. So genre pedagogy is beneficial for international students because it's explicit and systematic explanation of different genres. And it can also ensure the course objectives and contents are derived from students' needs. So genre pedagogy not only allow instructors to provide their students with both patterns embedded tests and also provides resources for students to challenge valued discourses. And then I would like to introduce the methodology in a quick way. The participants will be the faculty instructors in Canadian English universities, and this research is based on a large project. So we plan to recruit 200 participants. And the methodology is because we haven't collected the data, we haven't finished the data collection. So we plan to ask the 200 instructors to take a survey, and the survey will be interpreted as a quantitative analysis. And this analysis can reveal a broad chance in instructor support for international students writing. And the methodology, the second thing is I will ask 20 faculty instructors to do a focus group interviews, and it will be interpreted as qualitative analysis. So it can reveal the instructors' awareness of students' needs and their challenges they face in offering these supports. And the implication, because we don't have a result right now, so the education significance of this research is we can understand the current trends of faculty instructors' academic writing support. And after knowing their challenges in offering academic writing, we can also support faculty instructors' instruction and to release their pressure. And the last thing is also the most important thing is ensure the international students' academic success in higher education. So that's my presentation today, and thank you for listening, and thank you for your time. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much, Xinyan, for your great presentation. And I see that you have like way to go since it's an ongoing research. Thank
Yeah.
you very much. So like we
Thank
have time, it's a time for a question period. So please, if you want to ask any question to Xinyan, please ask. Unmute yourself and ask.
Hi, Xinyan.
Hi.
That was a nice talk, but I was just curious about how would you recruit your participants?
The participant, I can recruit the participants, right?
Yes. So, what criteria do you have to recruit, and why would you choose a particular participant?
I think I just circulate my advertisement around the universities in Canada. So the participants must have the teaching experience with international students, and also they are teaching disciplines in the university. So these two are requisite for choosing the participants, and then see what kind, how many instructors would like to join in the survey. Yeah.
So you're not particular about any department. You are open
No.
for any department.
So for any disciplines, any departments, that's true. Yeah.
Okay, and do you have any requirement of number of years they should have taught a course, or anybody is okay?
I think it's any courses is fine, because it's a Canadian universities higher education, so it doesn't. It's not very specific in a certain disciplines. So it's all right. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
So it's not a question, it's a kind of a curiosity to know. So what is your like hypothesis? What is your expectation in terms of, you know, getting a solution or a good response or a good, you know, I should say solution of the problem or the negligence, I should say, from the faculties to help international students to improve their writing. So what is your expected response? What is your hypothesis?
There are several ways, like the faculty can provide the teacher training for instructors. Actually, maybe some teachers are not aware of the writing problem, and they don't understand how to help their students writing. So the faculty can provide sufficient support in training and help them understand, and also help them understand the students' needs. And the second thing I think is the faculty can release the researchers' pressure in research. Maybe the faculty give the lecturers too much pressure on doing research or projects, so they can make it easier for the professors or instructors. That's another solution. Yeah, but I think we need to ask them and to take the interview and see what their response. But these two things I can suppose for the solution.
Yeah, thank you so much. Because whenever like any students ask for help and they just straight say go to writing center and that's it. So like they're so busy they don't have any time. So it's very it's a problem. It's a problem like many of us are facing. It's very normal though. Like any more questions? Because she has 3 more minutes.
Yeah.
Well, I have just another curiosity. So like, do you have any like, do you choose like a permanent faculty, like who have tenure or like part-time, or like who are from PhD? So what is your criteria to, you know, include them in your research?
Yeah, the criteria is just they have working experience with the international students, and whether they are part-time or full-time, that's no problem. But they should have certain percentages of international students. If in their class there's only one international student, I don't think we can need these kinds of instructors. So at least the 10% of the students in his or her class are international students. I think it's okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, thank you so much. So maybe, is there anyone to ask Xinyan any question? Who said yes? Lynn.
I will. Yeah, hi there. Thank you, Sang. Yes, can you hear me? Yes?
Yes.
Sure.
I'll turn my video on here. I was just curious about whether or not there's anything that is known about the ineffectiveness of the traditional writing programs that universities offer that are not meeting the needs in certain areas. Like, is it in science, in certain, like in the humanities? Is it known within discipline, in law? Is there, because we have international students coming in all, like, across disciplines, right, and in large numbers, Canada. So the traditional writing programs, it seems to me, focused on first language speakers. So is there anything going on at the other end of education, which is the writing programs and analyzing second language speakers and the writing needs of them, and across certain disciplines, whether there's differences? So is that what the researcher papers that you had referred to in your slide, is that what some of them were talking about?
Yeah, I didn't take a lot of notes on the slides about different writing courses programs, but that's a good question. So there are some courses called English for Academic Purposes, courses for international students, so we call them EAP course. But the EAP course, the writing teachers who has a really strong backgrounds in scaffolding writing or instructing writing, but the teacher might be from different disciplines. And all of the students, I mean, all of the international students come into the class, they are from different disciplinary backgrounds. So that is to say, one teacher can teach a lot of students who are from different backgrounds, and this teacher's discipline background is different from the other students. So this way, the teacher can only pass down the writing skills or writing techniques to the students, but not the writing conventions in disciplines. So that's the international students course problem. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Xinyan, for your great presentation. And our next presenter is Mithura Sanmugalingam. I hope I correctly pronounce your name, and if I don't, please excuse me. And her topic is understanding the well-being of graduate students when transitioning into research. And you will start at 2:50. And in the meantime, you can share your screen if you want. Thank you, and welcome, Mithura.
Thank you.
Yes, you can start.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I'll be presenting my research on understanding the well-being of graduate students when transitioning into research. Within the last few years, there's been a recent and significant increase in feelings of depression and loneliness that have led to burnout and suicidal thoughts among graduate students. In recent evidence from Harvard University, nearly 18% of graduate students have experienced severe symptoms of depression, and 11% reported suicidal ideation. And this was in 2018. These statistics, along with the several other quantitative statistics that exist out there, demands urgency, especially since much of the current research focuses on and funding focuses on undergraduate students. And given connections between major life transitions and several health disorders, this period of transition, first year school, is a high risk for developing psychological problems and other health issues. Graduate school, as you know, demands a lot from students. It demands a work and life balance, and also to endure the multiple challenges within the university and a research-intensive setting. In addition to the challenges that are faced by graduate students during their first year, specifically graduate thesis students have a unique experience. And in particular, many graduate students may be engaging in research for the first time. So my research aims to achieve two main objectives. The first one being to identify sort of common mental health challenges among master's students within an education faculty at a Canadian research intensive university. And the second one is to gather recommendations on areas of improvement and resource development that may contribute to student well-being during graduate school. And you might be wondering, why education students? Education students fall into this unique category where a majority of the students are coming from a professional degree program where research is not emphasized. And so this adds a layer of challenge and almost a unique perspective to their ability to transition into thesis program. And to explore these objectives, I will be looking at the following overarching question. How does well-being among master's students contribute or not to their research? I acknowledge and I'm interested in pandemic-specific determinants of well-being, and I realized that I couldn't interview my participants about challenges in well-being without them referring to the COVID-19 pandemic. But I'm also interested in how the pandemic magnifies the issues that are consistent for students, whether they're in a pandemic or not. And so with that, one of my sub-questions will address the COVID-19 pandemic. In addition, I'll be looking at how do master's students describe their well-being, how do they describe their well-being, and how do they describe their transition into research. I'm also interested in what key stakeholders have to say. So individuals who have been working directly with the master's students, what do they have to say about the wellness and transition to research? So the methodology that I'm proposing for my study will be a qualitative one. I'm conducting a thematic inquiry into the lived experiences of 5 master's students. And the methodological approach, as I mentioned, is thematic, which originated from ground theory. And I cannot anticipate what I will find prior to conducting my fieldwork and listening to the lived experiences of the participants. So this was the best way for me to go about organizing emerging themes from the data. And I will be conducting Seidman's, I'll be using Seidman's 3-part interview of 60 minutes each in order to gain an in-depth understanding of the master's students' experiences, through their voice to get a better understanding of the risks and contributors to mental health issues. In addition to this, I will also have a secondary data collection. I will be interviewing stakeholders from universities who have directly worked with the master's student. And throughout every step of the study, I will also be having memos. I'll be writing memos to keep track of my stance as a researcher and acknowledging my beliefs and biases as a master's student myself. So this will allow me to engage more deeply with the data and explore meanings behind what is said and to represent the voices of the participants more accurately. And so my data analysis, I will be doing constant comparison method. So through coding, categorizing, and reflecting, the categories will be formed from the data, and it'll be an ongoing process of expanding, shrinking, based on clarification and additional reflection until I reach a point of saturation, the data saturated. And the goal of this, as I mentioned, is to get the meanings that emerge from the data itself. And so here I like to show you a few of the transcripts that came out of the interviews. And as I mentioned, one of the key things here is that to compare and contrast the experiences with COVID and without COVID. Some of the things that were mentioned, this in particular was in relation to COVID. So students were expressing financial issues with financial wellness, as well as COVID-specific stressors, interpersonal trauma, so a bit of speaking on their mental health, and as well as social connections and relations as well. And then here is another sort of excerpt from one of my participants who's expresses their experience before COVID. So especially here, you can see some of the stressors related to thesis, doing a thesis program. So trouble with motivating themselves, figuring out what one does with a thesis, best way to transcribe your data. So these are all sort of challenges that students have experienced with regards to wellness and also their transition into research. So what does this all sort of mean? With well-being research, while well-being research in education has received attention in recent years, there still exists some gaps in higher education. Little research is done on graduate students, as much of the current existing research focuses on quantitative measurements of well-being, and more specifically with postgraduate students. So through my study, I hope to add this new knowledge to research in higher education, and by more specifically by listening to the lived experiences, I feel that you can get a more in-depth understanding of the underlying issues and make sense of what challenges are students facing with their ability to do research and also with their mental health and wellness. And essentially, I hope that the data and what comes out of this research will help with informed decision-making policy with policymakers and increase awareness among key stakeholders, as well as to bridge support. So bridge support in whatever program is currently offered and the current knowledge on transition to graduate school. And yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mithura, for your presentation. I mean, yeah, you have like 10 minutes, whatever. So like if you, thanks once again for your great presentation. So do you have any question like, to ask Mithura? You can ask Mithura, like if you have any question. She'll be very happy to answer.
Yeah, if you have questions, I'm open for questions.
I guess I have one. So Mithura, you mentioned that you have five 5 participants that you that are currently part of your study, what kind of questions have you been asking them, or is it more about what kind of experiences they're having? So, and because I just want to get an idea, you know, to qualify these participants, are they considered as, you know, someone who isn't doing too well mentally, or, you know, there are people who are doing well mentally, can they still be part of this? Would it still be a valid type of information for you to include in your study?
Yeah, thanks for your question, Catherine. I did have a sort of like an inclusion criteria. So one of the things was that this was because it's part of my cohort. I wanted to ensure that I did not have personal relationship with this student beforehand. So that was one criteria. The other criteria was that they've completed at least 2 semesters of their program, and they have to be in a thesis program. I was recruiting sort of in that faculty, in that department, there was a few programs. So it was kind of, it was open in that sense. I didn't have any exclusion in terms of health factors at all, no.
Yeah, thank you. Mithura, I have a question. Yes. So so far I know the university, they offers like help for mental well-being, like for socialization. What do you think of that? I mean, why still they are in some sort of difficulties while they are supposed to get this type of help from a university? I mean, what is their opinion in that case?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Exactly, there's a few different factors here. One is, you know, the willingness to go out and seek help, and then feeling comfortable to go to something like a program that's offered by the university. Oftentimes, students have mentioned that they much rather prefer speaking to a peer. So that's like one aspect of it as well. And students are not really reaching out to those programs. Like there are, as you mentioned, wellness services, different kind of you know, professionals available, but there's a disconnect there in some ways, in terms of maybe, you know, they have mentioned that, you know, we're getting the emails, we're getting all of this, but they would much rather deal with it on their own. And maybe it's something particular about the characteristic of a graduate student. And, you know, a lot of them express their ability to overcome challenges, their resilience, and also almost put aside these aspects of their wellness, and don't see that as a need to go seek support. So there's that piece as well.
No, I mean, I'm really like, I really like the topic, because maybe this topic, maybe we don't even think of. For me, I don't understand, but maybe, yeah, this is a problem. And even if they're part of this society, maybe they're raised up with this culture, maybe there are some isolation they're facing and challenges, of course, and especially because of the age group. It's a very sensitive age group. I mean, because they just become adults. I mean, adult with the sense of being, because it takes time to develop this sense of being and who I am and what I want. So when you develop this sense, it is hard to cope, and it's tough. And I really like, I mean, I hope it will come out with a very, very good findings, and that will definitely help our society, you know, by proposing a good solution for this group of people who are suffering, probably alone, maybe. Because as you say, that they don't want to go to reach to help, and they want to talk to their peers. So yes, I really appreciate that. I mean, do you have any questions, Mithura, you can ask? Otherwise, I mean, like anyone to ask any question? Yes.
Not so much of the question, but a comment or feedback, right? I'm looking forward to the results of your research.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
I think it's very important. It's something that as graduate students, you talk to each other about it, but whether it's getting sort of the kind of notice from, especially in this manner. So yeah, I look forward to the paper when you're done with
Yes,
it.
Bernadine, and I just remind of we don't even know there are so many barriers. There are culture barriers. Maybe they are not from here. Maybe their cultural background is so different from the mainstream cultural background. Maybe they have family issues. There are so many barriers in society.
Right.
And also the most of them, they end up with a huge loan, like which they have to repay when they go to job market. So there are huge issues going on, and they look so smart, and they are not kind of paying attention to. So yeah, it's really that you bring them in light. So I really appreciate, your effort, that your intention of doing something good for them, and I really appreciate that.
Thank you. Thanks for the comments. Yeah. And part of the reason of doing like this 3-part interview is to give it as a reflection process for the student themselves. And oftentimes, and throughout sort of like the interview, I've had points where they would sort of have this realization like, oh, I haven't thought about this, but thank you because of this conversation. So
yes.
I think it's also helping them in that sense. So that's kind of a fulfilling aspect for me.
Yeah. And also, how do you do that during this, like, all lockdown and isolation? Do you do it virtually, or are you just in person?
No, I've done it all through virtually. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's another problem, right? Because you really can't touch them.
No,
Yes,
it's hard. It's
it's
hard to
hard.
make that connection, but because I spend 3 hours with them over the course, it kind of helps to develop that, and it's spread out over 2-week period. I do an hour, and each of those is a point. It's spread apart for the reason for them to reflect and maybe consolidate on the things they've mentioned to me, and maybe they want to clarify things. So that's the point of that. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mithura. So, like, our next presenter is Bernadine, and you have to start at 3:15. So there's a short break maybe we can take in the meantime, and we'll come back at just 3:12. Sort of
Thank
like
you.
that. Yeah, welcome.
Thanks.
We can talk, Mithura. So in which department do you study? Because I'm still here because I am a co-host and I'm a lead, so I really can't leave. So
Yes.
which
So
program are you in?
So I'm coming from McGill University, and I'm in the educational leadership program.
Oh, this is good. Very good to know. Is it your last year?
Yes, it's my last year, exactly.
Okay. So are you doing are you writing a paper on that, like a thesis paper?
Exactly, yeah. This is my thesis. Yeah.
This is really great. Wow.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks. I wasn't sure if I went to my time. Did I finish earlier?
No, it's okay. It happens. It's just okay, because yeah, before you there is one. No, like before Xinyan there is one who didn't show up. I mean, it happens.
Did I take my 10 minutes? I wasn't even sure. I didn't see the warning.
Yes, no.
No?
You are way early. No problem. No
just
problem.
So I know as a feedback for myself for next time. Just so I know how long did that take?
You finished 5 minutes early.
Oh wow, okay, it took 5
so
minutes.
You have 10 minutes for question period.
Oh, okay.
So yes, now we are about to begin at 3:15.
Gotcha.
So yeah.
Hello, can you
Yes,
hear me?
Fariha. Yes, yes.
Yeah, if we still have time, can I ask something?
Yeah, sure. To Mithura, of course.
Yeah. Yes. My question is, how did you, conduct this research? I mean, what was intention behind that? So I'm still struggling with that. What made you choose this topic?
Would you like to know sort of like my personal inspiration for it?
What was the inspiration behind that?
So part of it has to do with my background experience, because throughout my undergrad, I've been very involved on campus. In particular, I've been working at the student services where, I've come to speak with, a lot of graduate students over the years. I've came in contact with them a lot. And so just working in that environment, I recognized a need in that area. And that was kind of during my undergrad. And then sort of leading into that, a lot of the mental health services have improved since. And so this is almost sort of like an evaluation of that as well in some ways to see how it's been helping, how it's been working. But it really stemmed from just my personal experience working in that specific area. Yeah, I think that's where it came from.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much. So what do you expect how your research will contribute, or what would be impact of this research if wherever you are, I mean, in your setting?
Yeah, I think that, a lot of program directors are already sort of thinking about this, right? I'm sure it's on their mind. It's that, like they're looking at ways to help this particular group of students. And the thing with, master's students, it's so specific and unique because some of the cohort don't kind of move together. They're all kind of separated into their own space and working on their own. Whereas from what my understanding, that postgraduates do the same thing, but they kind of have a cohort that they're together with. And so like that specific aspect also adds this layer. But to your point, to your question, I'm sure they're thinking about this, but what this could do, I think one aspect is the COVID specific aspect. And what I'm finding is that maybe because, there might have been these challenges that are underlying that we would have never known if it weren't for COVID, because it just enhanced it and it kind of came out because of that. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, you mean if maybe COVID has triggered them, or maybe it has brought to the surface, and it has,
Yes, exactly. So your research triggers lots of responses and lots of reactions. It's very good. It's an inspiration for you, Mithura. So thank you once again, Mithura. So the last presenter this afternoon session is Bernadine Sengalrayan. I don't know whether I correctly pronounce your name. Excuse me if I cannot. And her topic is exploring the roles and involvement of knowledge users in education research, scoping review. So you have just 1 minute to begin. Thank you.
Hi. So, like I was introduced, my name is Bernadine Sengalrayan. So
sorry that I can't pronounce your name the way you pronounce it now.
No worries. When I was thinking about putting this presentation together, right, I was thinking of an elevator pitch, right? How can I describe what I'm doing in a sentence or less? So I think it can be boiled down to that I'm interested in how knowledge, research evidence is used in education research, is used in education, right? So this area of research is called knowledge mobilization. The Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council defines it as the reciprocal and complementary flow and uptake of research knowledge between researchers, knowledge brokers, and knowledge users, both within and beyond academia, in such a way they may benefit users and create positive impact within Canada or internationally, and ultimately has the potential to enhance the profile, reach, and impact of social sciences and humanities research. So the research in this area examines the movement of research evidence into policy and practice, right? We want to understand and improve that movement. You may have heard of other terms that come under it: knowledge translation, knowledge dissemination, knowledge sharing, knowledge management. So to understand more about knowledge mobilization, think of knowledge produced, right? So empirical research. I'm sure most of you are involved in research, also understand the process, right? You conceptualize a topic, you collect data, you analyze your findings, you disseminate it in hopes that it will benefit someone, right? So for example, you found out eating bananas improves grammar, right? So you write a wonderful journal paper on it. But let's be honest, the people that can actually use this information, like teachers or the school board or the Minister of Education, might not read your paper. So perhaps you then say, okay, I want it to go to schools. So you put it in a nice little report, right? And you send it to schools. Some schools and teachers might use it, but some of them may come back and say, you know, I'm not very sure how eating bananas can help grammar. Or they might come back and say, my students are sort of predisposed to being allergic to bananas, right? Or they may say, you know, our school board told us to use oranges to improve grammar, right? So I'm not sure about bananas. So you said, fine, let's go to the school board and talk to them about bananas, right? And the school board comes back to say, you know, we've already told schools to use oranges. I'm not sure we want to change it all the way. Perhaps you could put in bits of bananas in the diet, right? And I have a prior relationship with orange producers, right? So I don't want to make, and I don't want to shift that, right? So you see there is this gap between the producers of knowledge and those who actually use the knowledge. So what explains this gap? Kaplan, right, came up with the two communities theory, right? So essentially he said social scientists, so they're the producers, and knowledge makers, right, as the users, right? So they're two distinct communities, right? Then a couple decades later, Schenkhoff came out with the three cultures theory, because users are not one homogeneous blob, right? So he said that there are three separate cultures, right? The scientists, the producers, right? But you also have policy and practice, right? Three separate cultures and three separate ways of how they use knowledge. And a couple of years down the road, Schneider and Colbert came out with, as counter proposes, the community dissonance theory, right? Because they felt that just putting users in policy and practice was an oversimplification. Instead, we should consider sort of the cultural influence that different users might have. But if we go back to the difference of knowledge mobilization models, right? Whether it's dissemination or translation, there is a producer push narrative, right? So it looks at users as intellectually blank or oblivious. They just absorb, right, findings. And we know that's not true. And this was taken up, right, by a discussion paper requested by the Canadian Council of Learning and Schrock, right, looking at the state of the field in KMB in learning back in 2008. Right, so he found that this relationship between producers and users very linear, right? That we give too much dominance to researchers and their work. So this link, this connection, this movement is supposed to be reciprocal, right? Personal connections, right, between producers and users remain the most powerful vehicle in moving evidence into practice. So this was the report that sort of sparked this research. So what's the purpose of my research, right? Back in 2008, KMB was a relatively new field, right? In 2020, research has grown 4 times. So it stands that in the last 12 years, right, since the report was written, right, and the growth of academic work in this area, we should see a difference in how this misalignment and one-way linear process in KMB research has changed, right? Hopefully it has developed strong reiterative research producer user connections touted by its own research. So my study uses a scoping review to take an exploratory look at the engagement of end users in KMB research, particularly in Canadian K-12 education. Right, so I am mapping current KMB research, right, to see if there's any attempts to develop an iterative relationship between producers and users, right? I want to identify the profile of users in this field, right, as well as to summarize and look at the changes and trajectory of their roles. So I used a scoping review because it helps to get sort of the state of the field. It explores evidence from available literature and identify gaps for further research. I have no intention here to evaluate the strengths of the studies, their methodologies, or their impact. So at the end of screening, we had about 28 studies right at the bottom there in the scoping review. So data was extracted. I looked at type of engagement activities, frequency of engagement, the type of knowledge users, the research subject area. So for the first objective, right, as I said, we had 28 studies spread over 13 years. It shows that perhaps we need more research in this area, right, that particularly looks at knowledge mobilization in education, right? And then we also looked at the subject focus in this research. We found that even though they were studying knowledge mobilization or knowledge mobilization related concepts, right, these studies often had an additional focus. I mean, they are in education. So they look at, for example, KMB and health, KMB and curriculum, KMB and teacher ed, right? So it's very highly disciplinary, right? And it supports, right, the imperative that knowledge producers, especially in KMB, need to engage knowledge users, right? Because as if you do KMB, sometimes you're so focused on just the movement, you might not have the insight of a specific domain or the tacit knowledge, right, that users have. I also looked at the engagement of these users throughout the research process in 4 stages: at the beginning, during, at the end, and after the research. So if we look at the analysis, when we look at the involvement of knowledge users in KMB research, they were mostly involved during the research process. So they were participants or they gave data to the research, right? When we looked at the total number of stages where knowledge users were involved, right, we can see that knowledge users was generally involved in at least 2 stages. That seems quite encouraging, right? But when we looked at the intensity of those interactions, right, most KMB studies only engage their users once or twice at each stage, right? So in my paper, I do go into some details of what that might mean for KMB research. Now, for the profile of knowledge users, it's quite diverse, right? We have teachers, we have school admin, we have principals, right? But remembering our earlier discussion about the research gap, right? I was interested to not just put them in like practitioner or policymaker sort of bubbles, right? I looked instead at what they did, what they were involved in, rather than who they are. So I categorized them into 4 subgroups: whether they were involved in practice, inside or outside the school, or whether they were in leadership positions inside or outside the school. Because it does make a difference, right? Your positionality within that whole institution, the cultures that you have, the values, and the way you use research. For the last
Hi,
objective,
Bernadine, you have 5 more minutes.
sure. So for the last objective, I looked at the enablers and barriers cited in the research to get a sense of the limitations that were talked about in the 208 paper and whether those have been addressed. Have they made improvements? So they talked about trust, right? There was trust, there was good relationships, there was collaborative sort of engagement, and there was like leadership support. So you can see there was intent to create and develop closer relationships. So that's there. But if you look at the barriers, right, they talked about limited time and resources, right? Because building relationship takes time, and time equals money, and there just isn't enough support there at the moment, right? And there's still a perceived divide between teaching and research, right? Particularly by users who see theory and practice as unrelated binaries, right? So these barriers were unsurprising, right? And commonly reported not only in the 208 report, but in subsequent KMB literature. So it shows that we still have a way to go in sort of bringing users into KMB research, right? So I wanted to make sure that I practice what I preach, right? That in my research, I consulted with knowledge users as well, right? So when I put together my RQs and my methodology, I spoke with a KMB practitioner, many years in the business, as well as someone who had 20 years of teaching experience in Canada, right? So I asked, is this a real gap in the research? Yes, right. Was the scope sufficient, right? So the KMB practitioner said no. So I worked with him to include additional keywords in my scoping review searches, right? So in that same spirit, this research has important implications for other researchers like you. So as we come to the end of my presentation, I have questions for you. In addition to any questions you might have for me, I'd like to find out from you, right? Does knowing about knowledge mobilization change how you will approach knowledge users in your research? And what can be done to support enablers or limit barriers in your work? So
I don't know whether I'll be able to answer your question. I want to pronounce your name correctly. Bernadine, am I correct?
Yes.
Great. Well, I have lots of things going on in my mind right now when I was listening to your research, and this is such a new topic, and this is such an important topic because nobody really, questioned on the users of knowledge because they're so powerful. They're policymakers, they're practitioners, and their effort, their practices is always unquestioned. So it's tough. I mean, it's tough to because that if you find an answer, a solution, you have to question the system. You have to question the policy, and you have to question the power dynamics played in our society. And it's so much going on. I mean, I'm really, I'm feeling very heavy. Then the burden we are all experiencing due to the system inequality and the system injustice and social injustice, and it's tough. And I really absolutely agree with you that there should be some accountability. That how, since they are in a big role, they play a big role in a society. How how effectively do they produce the knowledge? This is because they're users the knowledge, when they at the same time they are playing a role to produce a knowledge, and how do they affect on others? So this is a big responsibility, and they're always like somewhere, as you said, the binary. They're always at the upper rank, the upper are and who are the below at the bottom, and they are so powerless and they're so busy. They have no voice, they have no space to ask questions. And then so yeah, it's a very insightful presentation, and I really like. So if you finish your presentation, you can stop sharing, and then maybe someone can ask questions to you. Yes, so thank you very much. I'm so sorry, Bernadine, for your excellent presentation. Like, if you want, you can ask a question This is her time to answer questions. Well, I can ask you a second. It's not a second question, please. It's my comment, my insight.
Sure.
I mean, how do you what conceptual are you using for this research?
Conceptual frameworks, you mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I looked at firstly the framework of how research is used. So there's lots of different ways in how different people in different roles use research. So, for example, policymakers that you were talking about, they often use research not just taking the findings and using them. They would often also take it to support a policy that they already have in mind. By understanding how different people use research, how different people use information, knowledge, I think we can better structure the way not only we disseminate our information, but perhaps even how we do our research. So for example, I can think of one of the studies that involved involved users at all stages. They had a really sort of collaborative spirit with the users. And because they knew that, okay, the teacher, so these were teachers, the teachers used research generally to, they won't take research wholesale from us, right? They pick pieces that works in their classroom. So they actually work with the teachers to see, okay, what about my research doesn't apply to an average sort of Canadian classroom? And how can we make sure that our, how we think of knowledge, right, really gets actively used by those that will be affected by my findings, or those that you foresee could use your findings. Does that answer your question?
So thank you so much. Thank you so much. And so yes, so the room will be closing in just 3 minutes. So thank you, Bernadine, for your presentation. And thank you for joining with us. And so this is the end of the afternoon session. So you have other session going on. It's not a session, it's a keynote speaker at 3:45. If you want to join, you can join there. Thank you so much. And then yes, and have a great day. Thank you, Catherine, and thank you, Fariha, and thank you all being here. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Bye. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.